They stole my land, laughed in my face, called my wife's garden ugly vegetation. So I let them dig. Didn't stop them, didn't even blink. Then, boom, water exploded through their $1 million project. Screaming, sirens, lawsuits. And me, I just sat on my porch, sipped coffee, and said, "Told you not to mess with federal infrastructure. You want to know how I did it? Good, because this wasn't revenge, it was justice. Planted deep 3 years ago." The dirt here remembers everything. Every row I till every seed I touch, it's like she's still with me. Emily planted this garden during chemo. Said kale keeps things alive longer. Maybe she was right. I still run my hand over the leaves like she did. Gentle, careful, the way she touched everything. This land isn't just soil, it's her stubborn hope, her quiet strength, her hands buried deeper than any roots. People say it's just a patch of greens, but they didn't watch her bend over this dirt coughing and still smiling. They didn't see her line up those rows even when the doctors said she had weeks. She never finished the fence. So I did. After the funeral, nailed every board by hand. Not for curb appeal, not for resale, to keep what mattered in and everything else the hell out. She could barely stand that morning. Chemo had wrecked her bones, but she still grabbed the trowel. "I just want the soil loose before the rain," she said, half out of breath. I told her to rest. She ignored me, like always. Emily knelt down slow, pressed her hand flat on the dirt, stayed there a moment like she was listening to something under the ground. Then she looked at me, eyes sharp, voice soft. "Don't let them take this place, Dan." She didn't mean the house. She meant this garden, this patch of earth she fought for when her body was losing everything else. That moment stuck. I didn't argue, I just nodded. Later that week, she couldn't get out of bed, but the kale still came up, row after row, like she planted something stronger than vegetables, like she planted a warning. The white SUV pulled up like it owned the road. Clean, quiet, too polished for this place. Out stepped Cheryl Whitmore, pressed suit clipboard in hand. Sunglasses that never came off. She didn't say hello, didn't ask how I was doing. She just scanned the yard like it was a crime scene. "I'm here to discuss the aesthetics of the neighborhood," she said. "We need uniformity in our landscaping. Consistency supports property values." I didn't answer, just let her words hang like pesticides in the air. Her heels clicked across the gravel, stopping at the edge of the garden. She made a face, like kale offended her personally. "These plants, they're not on the HOA approved list." That's when I knew. She didn't see soil, didn't see legacy, just saw a space to control. She turned back to her car and said without looking at me, "Expect a notice." It was the same week Emily stopped eating. The house was quiet, too quiet. Cheryl showed up with papers in a leather folder and a rehearsed look of sympathy. "Mr. Callahan," she said, "we know this is a difficult time. The board just wants to help you move forward." She handed me a violation notice. 3 pages, noise complaints, landscaping issues, improper fencing. Then came the offer. "We have a developer interested in the lot, a community park. It would honor your wife's memory." Her voice dropped like she thought that would soften the blow, but I saw the pen she already clicked open, saw the blank signature line at the bottom. She wasn't here to help. She was here to take. "There's no shame in letting go," she added. I didn't answer, didn't yell. I just stared at her until she left. Folder unopened. Signature untouched. I didn't yell, didn't throw her papers back or slam the door. I just watched her leave heels clicking down my driveway like nothing here ever mattered. Some folks fight loud. I don't. Doesn't mean I forget. I remember the way she smiled while handing me that violation. I remember the pen already uncapped. I remember the words, "There's no shame in letting go." But letting go was never the plan. I kept every letter she sent, every fine, every email. I made copies. Not because I was scared, because I was patient. Emily always said, "Let people show you who they really are. Then wait. So that's what I did. No threats, no warnings, just seeds, planted deep, and one day she'd trip over every single one of them. That day was coming. I didn't know when, but I'd be ready. The envelope came with that same HOA seal gold foil fake importance. Inside was a violation notice, typed, signed, highlighted in yellow. Vegetable crops are not included in the approved ornamental plant list. Kale must be removed within 14 days. Kale. That's what they chose to fight. Not a junked car, not a broken fence. Kale. Emily's kale. I read the letter twice. Then again. Not out of confusion, out of disbelief. They called it a landscaping violation. I called it a message. Cheryl wasn't trying to tidy up the neighborhood. She was testing how far she could push, trying to see if I'd bend. But I didn't. I planted 3 more rows the next morning, watered them slow, took my time. Let her know if she wanted a war, she'd have to rip out every leaf and deal with what lay underneath. Glenn Harper lives 2 doors down. Retired math teacher. Grandkids visit every other weekend. Good man, quiet. One morning he walked over holding a pink violation slip in both hands. His fingers were shaking. I only left the bike out for 30 minutes, he said, voice barely there. Just 30 minutes. His grandson had left it on the grass after lunch. The notice called it clutter, visible from the street. $50 fine. Repeat offense, threatened a lien. He looked at me like maybe I could explain it. I couldn't. Not because I didn't know why, but because I knew exactly why. It wasn't about the bike. It was about control. Cheryl had started sending a message to the whole street. 1 warning at a time. 1 fine at a time. Bend or break. I watched Glenn walk home slower than usual, and I knew we were all on the list now. The next HOA meeting wasn't optional. Every driveway had the same flyer taped to the mailbox. Mandatory attendance. New Community Enhancement Initiative. I went, sat in the back. Cheryl stood at the front like she was pitching to investors. Charts, renderings, bullet points. The Willowbrook Community Park she began will transform underused land into a shared space. Benches trails a fountain. This project will increase property values by at least 12%. I didn't have to ask what land she meant. Everyone in the room turned toward me. She smiled when she said it. Phase 1 begins here at the southeast corner lot. That was my lot, my garden. They clapped. Some politely, some because they were afraid not to. She didn't say my name, didn't have to. She wrapped her plan in beautification and equity. But underneath it was still theft, and I was the first target. I waited until the room quieted, until she finished her last slide, another glossy photo of my garden reimagined as a dog park. Then I raised my hand. Did you conduct a geological survey before selecting the site? I asked. Calm, even. She didn't pause. I don't need a farmer teaching me about land use, she said, not even looking up from her clipboard. Laughter. Forced, nervous. I kept my eyes on her. Because if you had, I said you'd know there's infrastructure buried under that soil. Deep. Pressurized. Her eyes finally lifted, but only for a second. Our team is confident in the plan, she snapped, and frankly your tone is bordering on hostile. There it was. She didn't want questions. She wanted silence. But I wasn't giving her that. Not anymore. And the ground she ignored. It was waiting. I didn't storm out of the meeting. I waited until the handshakes ended, until Cheryl left with her board of yes men. Then I pulled out my phone and called one person, Tom Alvarez, County Utilities. Old friend, good memory. He picked up on the second ring. You still got that file I sent you? I asked. There was a pause, then a slow, careful answer. The infrastructure clause. Yeah. Tucked away just like you asked. I walked out into the dark back toward the garden. The wind had shifted. The air felt heavier. She's going to dig, I said. Tom sighed. Then she's going to hit something she really shouldn't. I didn't say yes, didn't say no. Just looked out across the rows Emily planted. Some people plant vegetables. I planted a safeguard 3 years ago. Now all I had to do was wait. I don't record everything, but that meeting I hit record the moment Cheryl walked in. She thought it was just another strategy session. She didn't know the mic was under the coffee pot. Halfway through, she leaned back and laughed real smug. Federal regulations, she scoffed. Please, that's just bureaucratic garbage written by people who've never stepped foot on a real property line. Someone chuckled. Another nodded. And just like that, she handed me more than arrogance. She gave me a confession. I saved the file, backed it up twice, named it HOA Meeting March Evidence. Wave wasn't the only thing I had, but it was clean, clear, the kind of thing you play in a room full of angry homeowners, the kind of thing that makes silence heavy. I didn't need her permission. She gave me her truth, right into the mic, and I made sure it wouldn't go to waste. The room was too quiet until Ruth Sanders stood up. She's lived here longer than anyone. Walks with a cane now, but her voice still cuts clear. Has this project been voted on by the residents, she asked. Straight, no sugar. Cheryl smiled that tight, practiced smile. I represent the interests of the entire community, she replied. Didn't answer the question, just stepped over it. Ruth didn't sit. She looked around the room. Eyes met. A few heads nodded barely. Others looked down. You could feel it, something shifting. It wasn't just me anymore. Other people were starting to feel the squeeze, starting to wonder how deep Cheryl's control really ran. But no one else spoke. Not yet. Ruth sat down slow. Her eyes still locked on Cheryl. That moment hung there like unfinished business. And in that silence, I knew doubt had finally entered the room. By the end of that meeting, I didn't need to guess anymore. Cheryl was going to dig. Right through it. I called Tom again. Told him the date. Told him to be ready. He didn't ask questions, just said, "Copy that." I walked to the edge of my garden that night, checked the markers, measured the space again. Everything was still where I left it, quiet, legal buried. 3 years ago, it was just a clause in a water upgrade form. Now, it was a loaded tripwire, and she was inches from stepping on it. I looked at the empty lot across the street. Big machines would roll in soon. Not for progress, not for community, for power, but Cheryl didn't know what lived under her blueprint. She's not building a park, I muttered. She's digging her own hole. And the countdown had already started. The next flyer came with glossy renderings and bold text future site of Willowbrook Community Park. Breaking ground this week. I found it taped to my mailbox again. Same spot, same tape, same message. At the next HOA meeting, Cheryl rolled out a full-size site plan, spread it across 2 folding tables, lines, labels, landscaping, a splash pad right over Emily's garden. She tapped the map like she was presenting a war strategy. This is community property, she said, and as HOA president, I have full authority to develop it in the interest of all residents. People nodded. Not because they agreed, because they were tired. She spoke in absolutes, always had. But this time, she made a mistake. She assumed no one would question her definition of community, or look into who actually signed off on the land designation. She thought loud confidence was the same as law. That's the thing about Cheryl. She talks like nothing can push back. I was about to prove otherwise. It started small half-whispers on sidewalks, quiet glances during trash pickup. Are they really taking Dan's land? I thought that garden was his. Can they even do that? No one said it out loud during meetings. But out here in the shade of trimmed hedges and quiet porches, the questions were growing. Mr. Thompson paused while watering his lawn. Just doesn't feel right, he muttered. Mrs. Howard clutched her tote bag a little tighter when Cheryl's SUV drove by. People weren't siding with me, not yet, but they were watching, starting to wonder. The HOA had always walked a thin line, rules finds forms. But this time they were drawing that line across something personal, something green and living and full of memory, and people could feel it. Cheryl didn't notice the shift, but I did. The silence was thinning, and cracks were starting to show. The backhoe had barely broken the topsoil when one of the contractors paused. He waved over to Cheryl, wiping sweat from his brow. "Ma'am, we're getting a metallic echo at about 8 feet, he said. "Could be piping or something structural under there." She didn't even flinch. "Keep digging," she said flatly. "I don't pay you to be cautious. I pay you to move dirt." He hesitated, looked at his crew, then back at her. "If it's utilities, we could be liable." Cheryl cut him off, eyes hard. "I'll handle the paperwork. Just follow the plan." That's when I knew it was happening, the moment I had been waiting for. I stood across the street, hands in my pockets. Didn't say a word, because when someone ignores a warning that clear, they're not just making a mistake, they're signing their own paperwork. Before the machines rolled in for real, I gave her one last chance. I wrote the email myself. No lawyers, no threats, just the truth. The southeastern plot contains layered subsoil and legacy infrastructure. The area has a complex geological profile. Strongly advise a full third-party survey before proceeding. I kept it short, precise. Attached a soil map from 2019. Included a note from the last utility update. I even used a polite subject line, site safety note. Please review. She didn't respond, but I saw her glance at her phone during the next HOA walkthrough. Saw her swipe the screen away without reading. A week later, the digging began, and that email marked as read, logged, time-stamped. I didn't expect her to listen, but I needed her to see it. Because when things went wrong, she couldn't say she hadn't been warned. She marched across the lawn like it was a battlefield. Clipboard in one hand, boots too clean for real work. Stopped just a few feet from me. "This isn't your land anymore, Dan," she snapped. "It belongs to the community. I decide what happens here now." I looked past her. The machines were already warming up. Contractors waiting for the nod. I stayed calm, didn't raise my voice. "Go ahead. Dig," I said, eyes steady. "But if I were you, I'd double-check what's under your feet before turning that engine on." She scoffed, rolled her eyes. "Is that a threat?" I shrugged. "It's advice." She turned without another word, but her pace was slower walking back. For the first time I saw it. A flicker of doubt in her eyes. And that was enough. The ground wasn't just soil anymore, it was a fuse. The first sound wasn't loud, just a low mechanical whine, steady, sharp. The auger bit into the earth like a needle through fabric. Then came the vibration, not just in the ground, but in your chest, like something deep was resisting. One of the crewmen called out, tightening his grip on the handle. "Pressure's climbing fast. This isn't normal soil." Another worker checked the gauge. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "We've got abnormal back pressure, way too high for a clean dig." Cheryl stood at the edge of the site, arms crossed. "Keep going." The machine growled louder, metal on metal, a hiss, then a jolt. I watched from across the road, leaning on my fence post. No need to interfere. Nature and buried truth were already speaking. The tension in the air was thick, and under the weight of that spinning drill, everything was holding its breath. The second I heard the drill scream, not whir, but scream, I took out my phone. No rush, no panic, just steady fingers. Scrolled to one name. Tom Alvarez. He picked up on the first ring. "It's happening," I said. "She's digging past the buffer zone." There was a pause, a breath. Then his voice calm as ever. "You want me to file the federal alert?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see. "Time to open that clause we buried 3 years ago." Another pause. "Understood. It's in motion." I hung up, slid the phone back into my pocket. Across the street, the pressure gauge snapped to red. And me, I leaned back against the fence, just watching. Some people light fires, others set traps. I planted a document. Now the system was about to do what it does best. Correct what never should have been touched. It didn't crack. It roared. A sharp metallic pop, then a deafening blast. Water shot 15 feet into the air like a geyser. Soaked the backhoe. Swallowed the plans. "Shut it down." "Shut it down," someone screamed. Boots pounded through mud. Hands scrambled for controls that were already too late. The force snapped a valve clean off. Water tore through soil wire and concrete markers. One worker slipped face first into the spray. Another yelled, "It's pressurized." We hit main infrastructure. Cheryl stood frozen shoes, sinking face pale. I didn't move, didn't cheer, didn't blink. Just watched the blueprint unravel in real time. The garden was gone, ripped wide open. But the truth had surfaced. Loud, uncontrolled. Federal grade. Fences leaned. Soil buckled. Sprinklers twisted in midair, and all across the neighborhood curtains parted. They saw it. They saw her. This wasn't landscaping anymore. This was collapse. 15 minutes after the burst, the county truck rolled in. Tom stepped out. Hard hat, clipboard regulation boots, no smiles, no greetings. He walked straight past the crowd right up to the broken pipe, took one long look, measured, took photos, then turned to Cheryl. "You punctured a federally protected utility line," he said. "Unregistered excavation. No clearance, no soil analysis, no municipal notice." Her mouth opened, but no words came. Tom flipped the page on his clipboard. Estimated damage, $140,000. Civil penalties up to $500,000, plus restoration fees, plus federal investigation. Someone gasped. Cheryl's face drained of color. Tom didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every word hit like gravel in a quiet room. "Who authorized this dig?" he asked. Cheryl didn't answer. She didn't have to. Because everyone there already knew. And for the first time she realized it wasn't her HOA anymore. I stepped forward slow and steady. Didn't raise my voice, didn't need to. Just pulled the printed email from my back pocket folded once ink slightly faded. Held it out. "I warned you," I said calmly. "You got this 2 weeks ago. Marked as red. You chose to ignore it." Cheryl didn't move. Tom took the paper, read it, and nodded. "Clear documentation," he said. "This puts liability squarely on the party notified." The workers behind Cheryl stopped moving. One removed his gloves. Another stepped back. The crowd of neighbors grew still. No shouting, no drama, just wait. I looked Cheryl in the eye. "You didn't make a mistake," I added. "You made a decision." She blinked, tried to speak. Nothing came out. Sometimes proof doesn't need volume, it just needs timing. And this was the final nail. Delivered without a single raised word. One of the contractor's big guy, orange vest soaked through, stepped forward. Voice steady. Not angry, just done. "I warned her," he said, nodding toward Cheryl. "Told her we hit something metallic at 8 feet. Could have been pipe, could have been casing." He held up a clipboard of his own. I logged the warning. Time-stamped, and she said, and I quote, "Keep digging. I don't pay you to be cautious." Cheryl's jaw clenched. Her mouth twitched. Still no words. Tom didn't flinch. "You gave the directive," he asked. The contractor nodded. "Yeah, on record." Crew heard it too. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. No more speculation. No more deniability. She wasn't just negligent. She was on record, in public. Overruled protocol. Ignored warnings. Caused damage. And now, even her own hired hands weren't standing beside her. When truth speaks that plain, even silence becomes a confession. The crowd had been quiet until Ruth stepped forward. She'd lived here longer than most, always soft-spoken, always respectful. Not today. She looked straight at Cheryl, voice clear, no shake. "You turned this neighborhood into a prison," she said. "Rules, fines, fear. You made us afraid to plant flowers or leave bikes out." Cheryl opened her mouth. Ruth didn't let her. "We don't need you anymore." Gasps, then silence. One by one, neighbors nodded. Glenn, Mrs. Howard, even Thompson, who never took sides. It wasn't just about the water, or the pipe, or the fine. It was about how she ruled with arrogance, not care, and now the mask had cracked. I watched Cheryl's eyes shift, not angry anymore, just cornered. For the first time, she wasn't the voice in the room. Ruth was, and that simple line. It was louder than any outburst. "We don't need you." The community had spoken. Tom stepped forward, a plain envelope in his hand. No drama, no flourish, just procedure. "Ms. Whitmore," he said, his voice level, "this matter is being escalated to the Federal Infrastructure Authority." He extended the envelope. She didn't reach for it, so he placed it gently on the hood of her car. "You'll be contacted by legal counsel within 48 hours, he added. "Cooperation is not optional." The neighbors didn't cheer. They didn't need to. Cheryl stood still, not proud, not angry, just hollow. The HOA clipboard in her hand suddenly looked small, outdated, powerless. Her mouth opened, but no sound followed. Tom turned away, already logging the event. It wasn't personal. It was process. I watched her fingers twitch, hovering over the envelope. Not to pick it up, but like she still couldn't believe it was hers. Consequences don't shout. They arrive quietly in plain paper. She packed fast. SUV loaded by noon. No HOA sash, no clipboard, no words. No one came to help. No one waved. Not even a glance from the porches she used to patrol. The same feet that once marched through front lawns in polished heels. Now moved slower, heavier. She drove off without looking back. No goodbye, no apology. And just like that, the shadow lifted. That evening, Ruth stood under the old oak at the cul-de-sac. A quiet vote, no banners, no campaign. Unanimous. She became the new chair. No threats, no speeches, just promises to listen. Someone brought lemonade. Another offered seeds for the garden. For the first time in years, no one whispered about fines. No one checked their lawn twice. Peace doesn't arrive loudly. It shows up in silence when the fear walks out the gate and no one follows. A week later, I saw Glenn in his front yard. He was crouched low, planting tomatoes with his grandkids' dirty hands, wide grins. No fines taped to his door, no clipboard at his gate. I walked over, handed him a small paper bag. "Kale seeds," I said. "Heirloom. From Emily's batch." His eyes softened. He didn't say much, just nodded, then went right back to digging. Across the street, Ruth was setting up a sign, "Community Garden Meeting, Saturday." No permission slips, no rules about row spacing. Just a welcome. People laughed more now, left porch lights on, swapped recipes over fences that didn't need measuring tape. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were builders, planters, caretakers. No one needed to ask permission to grow again. And, for the first time in a long time, this place felt like home. Evening light poured over the garden, gold on green. The kale was taller than last spring. Thicker, braver. I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, boots kicked off. Wind moved slow, like it had nowhere else to be. I looked out over the rows, felt her there. "We kept it, Emily," I whispered. They tried, but we kept it. Silence answered, but not empty. Behind me, someone laughed down the block. Kids on bikes. No HOA, fine in sight. Sometimes victory isn't loud. It just stays. Voiceover. Ever been pushed around by someone like Cheryl? Ever had to fight for something small but sacred? Drop a comment. I've been there too. Because this story, it's not just mine, it's yours too. And maybe, just maybe, you've got a garden of your own worth protecting.